The night Elvis Presley died did not begin like a tragedy. It began like a secret. Inside Graceland, behind tall iron gates and velvet curtains, the most famous man in America was pacing the halls of his mansion with a silence that felt unnatural. He was 42, exhausted, and fighting a battle that almost no one outside those walls truly understood. The world still saw him as the king, a legend, a miracle of American culture. But inside Graceland, Elvis was a man whose body was shutting down, whose spirit was tired, and whose life had become a long corridor of painkillers, sleepless nights, and quiet despair. In the early hours of August 16, 1977, he walked into his bathroom with a book in his hand. No lights flashed. No alarms rang. No one imagined history was preparing to close its most dazzling chapter. Moments later, Elvis Presley collapsed. By the time his fiancée Ginger Alden found him lying motionless on the floor, the world's greatest showman had taken his final bow. News spread like a shockwave. Radios stopped their music. Reporters rushed to their desks. Fans outside Graceland screamed, cried, collapsed. The king of rock and roll was gone. And yet, as heartbreaking as his death was, the truth buried beneath it was even darker. Elvis had not been destroyed by fame alone. He was consumed by a system that pushed him to the edge, by a manager who controlled every breath of his career, by a heart that could no longer keep up with the pressure placed upon him, and by a dependency on prescription drugs that slowly, quietly, dismantled the greatest entertainer the world had ever seen. What happened to Elvis in those final hours was not an accident. It was the final chapter of a story filled with brilliance, exploitation, magic, loneliness, and a storm that had been building for decades. To understand why the brightest star of the 20th century burned out so violently, we must go back to where it all began, to a small boy in Mississippi who never knew the world would one day devour him. Before the world screamed his name, before the gold records and the blinding lights, Elvis Presley was just a quiet, skinny boy growing up in the poorest corner of Tupelo, Mississippi. His family lived in a tiny two-room house built by his father and uncles, a house so small that every breath felt shared, and every hardship echoed through the walls. Money was always short, food was never guaranteed, and the shame of poverty clung to him like a second skin. School offered no refuge. Elvis was shy, painfully sensitive, and often mocked for his clothes, his hair, and the softness in his voice. He never fought back. He simply absorbed every insult until it settled deep inside him. The only person who understood him was his mother, Gladys, the anchor of his world. Their bond was so close that neighbors often whispered about it, but to Elvis, she was the one place where he felt safe, seen, and loved. When the segregation of the American South kept people apart, music brought them together. Elvis wandered the streets of Tupelo, listening outside black churches where gospel choirs lifted their voices to the sky. That sound struck him like lightning. It shook him. It filled him. It awakened something powerful within a boy who had never believed he was extraordinary. By the time his family moved to Memphis in 1948, Elvis had discovered the only world where he truly belonged, a world built from gospel hymns, rhythm and blues, and the raw emotion that pulsed through Beale Street. He practiced obsessively, not because he wanted fame, but because music made him feel alive. It gave him a voice when he felt invisible. But the same loneliness that pushed him toward music would soon pull him into a destiny he never saw coming. The shy, gentle boy from Mississippi was about to step into a storm that would make him a legend and tear him apart piece by piece. Memphis did not crown Elvis Presley overnight. It tested him first. He was the outsider, the boy with the strange clothes, the long hair, and the voice that blended black gospel with country sorrow. People did not know what to make of him. Some laughed, some stared, but when he stepped into the tiny studio of Sun Records in 1954, everything changed. Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun, had been searching for a sound that could break every rule American music had ever known. In walked Elvis, trembling with nerves, unsure of himself, unsure of anything. But the moment he started singing, the room shifted. The air tightened. Sam leaned forward, sensing the spark before Elvis even realized it was burning. Then came the moment that rewrote history. Late one night, Elvis picked up his guitar and burst into a wild, unplanned version of the song, "That Is All Right." His voice cracked with electricity, raw, youthful, unfiltered. The band jumped in. The room exploded with energy. Sam Phillips slammed his hand on the desk and shouted, "That is it! That is the sound." When the track hit local radio, Memphis went into shock. Phone lines lit up. Teenagers screamed. Station hosts begged for the record to be replayed again and again. And in the middle of that storm, Elvis Presley stood frozen, not understanding how a boy who had spent his whole life trying not to be noticed had suddenly become the voice no one could ignore. But fame did not come alone. It came with fury. It came with outrage. It came with accusations that Elvis was corrupting America's youth, defying racial boundaries, and shaking his hips with a confidence that terrified the older generation. Mothers condemned him. Preachers demanded he be banned. Newspapers called him dangerous. Yet every attempt to silence him only made the crowds louder. The screaming grew. The theaters overflowed. The myth of the king was being written in real time. Elvis Presley had ignited something uncontrollable, and while the world believed he was rising, they had no idea he had just stepped onto a path that would soon swallow him whole. The more famous Elvis Presley became, the more violently America tried to pull him apart. His concerts were chaos. Girls fainted. Boys tried to copy his swagger. Reporters shoved microphones in his face, demanding to know why he moved his hips like that, why he sang like a black man, why he dared to break the invisible rules that kept the country divided. To the young generation, Elvis was freedom. To the older generation, he was a threat. And to the power structures of 1950 America, he was a storm they could not control. Church leaders called him sinful. Politicians accused him of promoting moral decay. Entire cities tried to ban his performances. One sheriff even threatened to arrest him if he moved his body 1 inch on stage. Elvis listened, smiled politely, and the moment the music started, his body answered for him. But the backlash ran deeper than shaking hips. America was a segregated nation, and Elvis had absorbed the sounds of black gospel, rhythm and blues, and soul into every note he sang. To some, he was stealing black music. To others, he was giving it a bridge to the mainstream. And to Elvis, he was simply singing the music that raised him, the music that healed him. Yet, no matter how pure his intentions were, he found himself at the center of a cultural war. Newspapers attacked him for corrupting white youth. Activists accused him of taking credit for black artists' work. Critics predicted he would fade within a year. Through it all, Elvis remained soft-spoken and unsure of how to defend himself. He never understood why the world insisted he was a danger. He only knew that when he stepped on stage, the loneliness of his childhood disappeared, replaced by a roar of thousands who finally heard the voice he had spent so long hiding. But behind Elvis, watching every reaction, every headline, every dollar made, was a man far more calculating, a man who would shape Elvis's destiny more than anyone else on earth. And Elvis had no idea his greatest enemy was about to introduce himself with a handshake that would change his life forever. When Colonel Tom Parker first approached Elvis Presley, he did not look like a villain. He looked like salvation. A larger-than-life showman with a booming voice, a wide grin, and a reputation for turning singers into superstars. Elvis, still shy and overwhelmed by fame, believed he had met the one man who could guide him through the chaos. He had no idea he was handing over the keys to his entire life. Parker moved quickly, almost surgically. He pushed out the people Elvis trusted. He took control of bookings, money, contracts, appearances, interviews, every breath of Elvis's public identity. And Elvis, in his innocence, trusted him completely. A boy who had once had nothing suddenly had a manager who promised the whole world. But the world Parker built for him came with chains. The Colonel was not American. He was an undocumented immigrant with a secret past he refused to discuss. That meant one thing: he could not leave the country. And because he could not leave, Elvis would never be allowed to tour the world. While millions overseas begged to see him, the Colonel blocked every offer, not to protect Elvis, but to protect himself. Elvis never questioned it. He simply believed Parker when he said it was for the best. Then came Hollywood. The Colonel signed Elvis into a series of movie deals that promised fast money, but drained every drop of artistry from him. Script after script was formulaic, empty, predictable. Elvis hated them. He begged for serious roles, roles that could show his soul, roles that could save his dignity as an artist. Parker refused. Movies were profitable. Movies were easy. Movies kept Elvis under control. And so, the king of rock and roll found himself singing in beach musicals, surrounded by dancing extras and plastic storylines. His music, once rebellious and electrifying, was reduced to soundtrack filler. Fans drifted. Critics mocked him. Inside, Elvis felt his dreams slipping through his fingers like sand. This was the prison the Colonel built, wrapped in gold, lined with fame, locked from the inside. But while his career was being drained of passion, something deeply personal was happening behind closed doors, a love story that began beautifully, but would soon unravel his heart in ways no audience ever saw. Long before the tabloids followed every step he took, long before Las Vegas and the ruin that waited for him there, Elvis Presley was just a lonely young soldier stationed in Germany. And it was in that unlikely place, far from Graceland and far from the screaming crowds, that he met the girl who would change everything. Her name was Priscilla Beaulieu. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and impossibly young. Elvis was 24, she was 14. Their connection was instant, the kind of spark that felt like destiny to a man starving for comfort. But the age difference, the secrecy, the imbalance of power, all of it cast a shadow that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Elvis brought her into his world slowly, carefully, as if afraid the outside world would tear them apart before the story even began. When Priscilla finally moved into Graceland, she entered a life built on extremes. Extreme fame, extreme pressure, extreme loneliness, and a husband who belonged to millions long before he ever belonged to her. In public, Elvis smiled, charming and flawless. Behind closed doors, he was moody, restless, and often absent in the ways that mattered most. The long nights of filming, the endless tours, the growing reliance on prescription pills, all of it created a fault line in the marriage. And every time Elvis returned to Las Vegas, that fault line widened. Vegas was temptation wrapped in neon. Showgirls adored him. Hotel owners worshipped him. The Colonel demanded more shows, more money, more of Elvis's soul. And the man who once sang with the fire of a rebel now numbed himself with pills just to climb on stage. Priscilla tried to hold the marriage together, but Elvis drifted further away each year. She later admitted she had cried alone more times than she could count. Eventually, even she could not ignore the empty spaces between them, the silence that had replaced laughter, the hurt that had replaced love. In 1973, they divorced. Not with hatred, not with scandalous public fights, but with a quiet heartbreak that both of them carried long after the ink dried. The world believed Elvis had everything, but losing Priscilla shattered him in ways no concert crowd could ever repair. And it was in that broken state that the next chapter of his life began, a chapter ruled by pills, exhaustion, and a stage that demanded more from him than his body could possibly give. Las Vegas glittered like a kingdom built just for Elvis Presley. The lights flashed his name. The hotels worshipped him. The crowds roared with the kind of devotion most artists can only dream of. But behind that golden curtain was a truth far darker than anyone imagined. Elvis was slowly dying, one prescription at a time. The schedules were brutal: 2 shows a night, 7 days a week. No rest. No silence. No moment to simply breathe. His body, once lean and electric, began to break under the weight of exhaustion. Chronic pain gnawed at his spine. Migraines stabbed behind his eyes. Insomnia kept him awake for days, and each new symptom was answered the same way, with another pill, then another, then another. Doctors, eager to please the king, wrote prescriptions as if they were harmless gifts: sedatives to sleep, stimulants to wake, painkillers to perform, muscle relaxants to recover. By the mid-1970s, the man who had once ignited the world with raw emotion was operating almost entirely under the haze of pharmaceuticals. Pills dictated his days. Pills dictated his nights. Pills dictated whether Elvis Presley could walk, sing, smile, or simply stand upright. His inner circle watched helplessly. Some were scared to speak. Others enabled the routine because confronting it felt impossible. And Colonel Parker? He saw only the money. As long as Elvis could stand on a stage, as long as thousands of fans filled every seat, the Colonel demanded more shows, more contracts, more revenue. The king was no longer a man. He was a machine. A machine kept alive with pills, pressure, and the crushing weight of expectation. Audiences noticed the change. Some nights, Elvis was brilliant, resurrecting the fire of his youth. Other nights he stumbled through songs, voice trembling, eyes glassy, sweat pouring under the hot stage lights, a heartbreaking mixture of brilliance and deterioration unfolding in real time. But the world did not know the full truth. Elvis's heart was struggling. His body was inflamed. His intestines were failing, and every new dose pushed him closer to the edge. Still, he performed. Still, he smiled. Still, he said yes when he should have collapsed. Because he knew the same thing everyone around him knew. If Elvis Presley stopped performing, everything else in his life would collapse with him. But the collapse was coming anyway, and Graceland would soon become the place where the final chapter of his tragedy would silently unfold. Graceland was supposed to be Elvis Presley's sanctuary, his palace, his refuge, the one place where the noise of the world could not touch him. But in his final years, the mansion transformed into something else entirely, a fortress of isolation. A place where time slowed, where curtains stayed closed, and where the greatest entertainer of the century slowly faded away. By 1976, Elvis was no longer the fearless young rebel who shook the world. He moved with stiffness. He breathed with effort. His eyes carried a heaviness that even the brightest stage lights could not hide. Yet fans waiting outside Graceland never saw that version of him. To them, he was still the king, eternal, invincible, untouchable. Inside, the truth was different. Elvis lived mostly at night, wandering room to room in his jumpsuits or pajamas, unable to sleep without medication. Meals arrived at impossible hours. Books lay scattered across tables. His once tight inner circle shrank to only a few people who understood the fragile condition he was in. His relationship with Ginger Alden, his final companion, brought moments of warmth, but even she could not reach the parts of Elvis that were shutting down. Pills filled his bathroom counters. Doctors rotated in and out of Graceland as if the mansion itself was a private hospital. Despite everything, Elvis kept planning comebacks. He talked excitedly about new tours, new recordings, new chances to prove he was still the king. But his body was failing him faster than his dreams could keep up. He struggled with blood pressure, liver damage, intestinal issues, and the relentless exhaustion that came from decades of pushing himself beyond human limits. On the evening of August 15, he spent hours with Ginger, laughing, reading, and talking about the future. He seemed hopeful, determined, maybe even lighter than usual. But in reality, his body was at a breaking point. Around 2 in the morning, he went into his bathroom with a book in his hand. Ginger assumed he would be back in minutes. She waited. Minutes stretched into hours. When she finally checked, she found him on the floor, unresponsive. His heart had given out long before help arrived. The world believed Elvis died suddenly, but the truth is more painful. His death was the final note of a song that had been fading for years, slow, quiet, and devastating. And yet, the story does not end with his final breath, because what came after his passing would turn Elvis Presley from a cultural icon into an eternal legend. When the news of Elvis Presley's death swept across America, it moved with the force of an earthquake. People poured out of their homes. Radio announcers broke down live on air. Fans collapsed at the gates of Graceland, clutching candles, photos, and the memories that had shaped their entire youth. It was grief on a scale usually reserved for kings, and that is exactly what he had been. But in the days and years that followed, something extraordinary happened. Elvis did not simply remain famous. He transformed. He became myth. He became memory. He became the sound that shaped generations long after his voice fell silent. Artists from every corner of the world, rock, pop, country, soul, named him as their spark, their catalyst, the person who showed them that music could be wild, emotional, and unapologetically human. His influence ran through the veins of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, and thousands more. He had not just opened a door, he had kicked it off its hinges. Graceland became a place of pilgrimage, not a museum, not a tourist attraction, but a living shrine where millions walked the same paths he once walked, hoping to feel even a flicker of the magic he left behind. Yet, there was another legacy, a quieter one, a more painful one. Elvis's story revealed the darkest corners of fame. It exposed how the industry could lift a man to the heavens while slowly draining the life from him. It showed how isolation grows louder than applause, how success can become a cage, and how even legends can be broken by the weight of expectation. But what remains today is not the tragedy. It is the fire. It is the voice that reshaped American culture. It is the image of a young man who stepped onto a stage and changed music forever. Elvis Presley did not live to see the world fully understand him. But in every song he recorded, in every heart he touched, in every artist he inspired, one truth shines brighter than grief. The king never truly left. He simply stepped into a place where legends cannot fade.